My wonderful guest today is Sanele from Sanele Speaks. She is a professional speaker. She speaks to companies and organizations on entrepreneurship, something that we covered last year with Dr. Arina Yashin Shaw. She also speaks on entrepreneurship, especially when it comes to youth. She's currently working on a practical young entrepreneur seminar that's a little bit different than what's currently on the circuit. She also runs a non-profit organization called Ikusasa NPO, if I said that correctly, and that focuses on giving disadvantaged school children in the primary school school bags, which is something really important because any sort of barrier to entry that we can sort of eliminate when it comes to studies and education is really, really important. And so, Sanele, thank you very much for joining me on Imagineering.
Hi, Brent. Thank you for having me.
So now I want to talk about entrepreneurship, especially when it comes to the youth. What sort of gaps have you seen that we really need to focus a lot more on entrepreneurship with the youth?
I think when it comes to entrepreneurship with the youth, there's a lot that's going on that's good in terms of the fact that we're having the conversations about youth being entrepreneurial here in South Africa quite a bit now. However, obviously, like in anything, there's always more that can be done. And I think in our case, it's really focusing more on making the youth understand that being an entrepreneur doesn't require a whole lot of capital, doesn't require even funding from the government or from your mom, from your dad, or whatever. It actually just requires you taking the little that you have and thinking, what can you do right now that can even just double the amount that you have, even if it's just 10 Rand. If you can make that 20 Rand, you've made a profit and you've started your journey in being an entrepreneur. So I think it's the thinking around what an entrepreneur is. It's not just someone in a tie going to business meetings, but it's every person that you see when you go to the taxi rank selling fat cakes, selling you 30-cent sweets. Those people are entrepreneurs. And that's the thinking that we really need to try and focus on in terms of youth, to understand that so that they realize that scared to act, that's not really, doesn't look like the picture of an entrepreneur, to do the things that they think of doing to make themselves survive and make more money.
Right. But the problem is when you want to be an entrepreneur and the only vision that you have is that one of owning their own mega business or whatever, it's setting you up for failure because you don't have the skills or the experience necessary to run that business. So let's say you just got out of high school and you've been propped up now and you want to start your own business. So you borrow money from friends and family, your mom, your dad, right? Because the bank's probably not going to give you money just out of the gate. But then you start this big business, right? Then you start this big business, but you don't actually have the skills necessary to run that business. And that means 3 months down the line, you close the doors and now you're massively in debt with all those people. So you need to be prepared to run small entrepreneurial ventures, even if it's not something that you're passionate about. But just doing it makes the road easier down the line.
Yes.
And so one of your videos that's on YouTube,
absolutely.
So one of the videos that's on YouTube is about where you, I don't want to say rant, but where you basically explain that when someone said that you need to find your passion before you start an entrepreneurship and or a company or any sort of venture, and you're saying how wrong that sort of thinking is. Do you want to expand on that?
Yes, I definitely think this idea of finding your passion is great and it's lovely in the concept and the idea of it, but practically it doesn't really align with third world country, at least, problems. And I think a lot of our material that we get for entrepreneurs, we look at Gary Vee, we look at Richard Branson, we look at those guys and we say, okay, let's see what those guys are saying. And then we try and apply it in a third world country and the climate is just not the same here. So here we're in a situation where people are really just trying to survive more than in a stage where they're trying to thrive. So when you tell me, listen, be an entrepreneur when you find your passion, where do you think I will find the place and space for that passion if, let's say, say I'm living in a two-room house with 15 of my family members, and the daily struggle is just figuring out how to get electricity and water. And when I get to school, the conditions there aren't good either. And I've got the society that everything is working against me. I'm always trying to be one up to just stay alive. And then you say, find your passion.
Right.
Where
So
is the space in that?
what do you do? How do you do that? Now, let's say we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Where
Mm,
the bottom is food, security, shelter, safety, all those things.
yes.
And then we have to address the needs first before we get to the wants, right? So how do you
Absolutely.
tell me you need to find your passion and only then become an entrepreneur when you need to take care of business now?
That's the thing, Brent. It's exactly the thing. What I'm saying is, we need to find a way to reach people where they are and tell them, listen, it's okay to start any entrepreneurship journey to survive. And then here's the exact steps that you need to take in order to survive as an entrepreneur. Then once you've passed your survivalist stage, then you get into the stage where you're like, okay, I want to be sustainable. And then once you're sustainable, then you can thrive. But you need to start at a place here where we say, listen, this is how you survive. Because most of the youth, since everyone's always talking about unemployment here, that like 70% of our youth is unemployed, the problem is surviving.
Mm.
It's really not just sustainability. And history is telling as well that there is no strong luxury of saying, I'll just, my parents will take care of me as well. Because your parents are also going through their own things because of many historical things that have happened in our country, in South Africa. So I think that we need to change the narrative to saying, how do we help our young entrepreneurs understand the survivalist stage and practically? And I think I'm going to get into that later about the practical part, because that's where really my heart is at with young entrepreneurship.
I love that. And I just think about my own journey, right? Uh,
Mm.
I I don't call myself an entrepreneur, but as a child, we had the freedom to become entrepreneurial. Um, for example, my friend and I, we were like, I think it was 9 or 10, right? And we were walking on the beach, and there was this shark that washed out on shore, and it was dead, and it was decrepit, and it was, and all kinds of things. So what we did was we knocked out its teeth, and then made necklaces out of it and sold it on the beach, right?
Oh,
We
wow.
But it was just, or anything really. We bought chappies at or bubblegum, rather, if someone in America is watching this, bubblegum from the store, from the local store, and sold it on the beach or sold it somewhere else. That's not
Mm.
your passion, is it? It's not your passion to
No,
be the person who sells bubblegum. No. But you want to take
no.
care of business, right? You want to earn some
Yes.
pocket money. You want to earn something for yourself. So I
Yeah.
really totally agree with this idea that we shouldn't wait for a passion or for inspiration or whatever you might want to call it.
Mm.
I gave a speech a few years ago where I told the children that finding yourself is for hippies and losers. Determine where you want to go and then put in the steps necessary to get there. And I said it
Yes.
a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's true. I don't think that I'm not saying give up your dreams. I'm not saying don't be passionate. I'm not saying that at all. And if you watch the video, that's not what you're saying either. But
Mm.
start now, right? Because how do you expect to
Yes.
get to your dream or your passion if you haven't
Yes.
put in the necessary work or the steps to get there?
Yes. I think absolutely what you said to those kids is really important. I love that you're saying don't give up on your passions, but just start where you are.
Mm.
Because, oftentimes we find that when we start where we are, we actually eventually find our passion in what we do. Like you could
Exactly.
start selling fat cakes and then you realize actually you love the part where you interact with customers. And then you realize my passion is actually in sales. It's something that you would have never discovered if you didn't start. So saying start now isn't discouraging people finding their passion. Sometimes it's actually encouraging those who don't know where to start to actually find their passion.
And I always use Toastmasters as an example. Because I started Toastmasters because I wanted something to do that wasn't work related. I mean, it's changed now because it's like now my work. But it wasn't like it was my passion or my purpose or anything like that. But it led to something that is my passion, helping other people, speaking, educating, all
Yes.
those things. but way leads on to way. You never know where you're going to end up. But if you charge a course, like, it's better to have a compass than a map. Sometimes I think, right? So to have
Yes.
a general idea of I want to head north, I want to be an entrepreneur, right? So we need to find our way there. But if we're going to wait for a divine sign or some sort of thing, it's not going to happen. You have
It's
to
never gonna
start
happen.
now. There's an old saying of God only helps those who help themselves. But
Yes.
that's how life generally works.
Yeah.
What you put in, you get out, right? And sometimes you have to put in a
Absolutely.
lot before you get something out.
Mm. Sometimes it feels like you have to put in your soul to get something out, but
But would
but
you
that's
rather?
the nature.
But that's it. Would you rather do that than be the same person you are now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? You need to think about that. And I
Yeah.
know not a lot of people, especially young people, don't want to think 5 years ahead of time or 10 years ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to think about that sort of stuff. But if you're,
Mm.
especially when you're young, right? You've got
Mm.
the energy and the drive and the time to make a lot of mistakes and learn from it very quickly. Whereas
Yes.
30 years, 40 years, you don't have that time.
Yeah.
You don't have that freedom to make the mistakes. So by absolutely all means, make plenty of mistakes and become more entrepreneurial and learn from it as soon as you possibly can.
You possibly can. And when you're younger, you have less to lose.
That's right. No one's gonna come after you for your car or your house, right? When you're 9 years old.
Exactly.
It's like, you know, um, you don't have that much to lose.
You don't have that much to lose, so you have everything to
You
gain.
have everything to gain,
It
right?
makes more sense for you to go out there and try than not.
Yeah. So doesn't it just feel wonderful to be able to say, it's like, I'm happy to help you by sponsoring 100 bubble gums, or whatever it might be. It's like, but then you need to sell, right? And don't dip into the stock, you know. Um, it's but I love seeing entrepreneurship in children because it gives them, because I know those children that's going to grow up and they're going to add value to the country, to the society,
Yes.
and maybe not
Yes.
even on such a big scale, but we recently had a TEDx talk at Munchie, and one of the speakers was Heinrich Hafeni, who's a local entrepreneur. And he said,
Mm.
he failed grade 10. He struggled to get through matric, and he started his own business in his grandmother's backyard, selling
Yeah.
selling traditional food, right, for tourists. And so he
Nice.
grew, and he was a dishwasher, but he had many mentors, many
Mm.
people, and he's had this business and 1,000 other businesses that's failed. But now
Mm.
look at him, right? He's a successful entrepreneur. And it
Yes.
didn't just start, it didn't just magically happen. He had to
Yeah.
fall down a lot of times.
Yes. Yes. I think also you just mentioned something that's also really important when looking at young entrepreneurs, which is mentors.
Yeah.
Uh, he had many mentors, and I think that's also something that our young entrepreneurs need to be exposed to, understand the importance of, to just have someone that you can model, and they don't have to be 10 million steps ahead of you. They can just be 10 steps ahead of you. That's
Just
okay.
one step. That's all you need is one step.
Yeah, just
Just find
one step.
someone that knows one thing that you don't. And
Yes.
I advocated for this as well when I was still teaching was, the problem is we're all talking to each other, but no one's actually helping each other. So let's say this child doesn't know mathematics so well, but she's brilliant in English or accounting,
Yeah.
right? But this
Mm.
child is brilliant in mathematics, but she struggles in accounting. Why don't you join
Accounting.
forces and actually help each other and become each other's mentors?
Mm. I think there's real true value in that,
Mm.
and it's also something that you learn quite a bit of. You mentioned Toastmasters just now, but I think it's also something that I learned a lot from Toastmasters when I joined. Is the idea of mentorship, because you walk into a space. For those who don't know what Toastmasters is, it's basically a program that teaches you how to speak, how to be a better confident speaker, competent communicator rather, and a competent leader. And when you step into there, you think, okay, we go there for different reasons. Mine was speaking. I was like, I want to learn to be more confident and know how to speak. And you get then these people who are so much more talented and like just really great at being speakers that you're almost intimidated to begin. And you start your journey. But what really makes you grow isn't the fact that you just went along with the cause and went along with the guidelines that you had to do, but it's all these wonderful people who are 10 steps ahead of you who come back and say, hey, let me help you out. Why don't you try doing this? Why don't you use your hands like this? Why don't you think of crafting your speech in this way? Think of this content, all of that. And the next thing you know, you're the speaker that when you speak, people walk in and they're like, oh my God, I'm so intimidated to start because she's so amazing.
Right.
But someone pulled you up. And the same can be applied in entrepreneurship, is that you need that one person that you can look up to. They can say, hey, they're not saying I'm going to give you money. No, they're just giving you advice that can really change how you do things. So you also don't find yourself trapped in the same traps they were in, number one. And number two, reinventing the wheel, trying to get your own bookkeeping systems when there's already a bookkeeping system you could use out there for your tuck shop or whatever you're doing. So it's really, really also important, I think, to touch on getting mentors for young entrepreneurs, for them to seek them out in their communities and find even a person who's one step ahead. Yeah.
I agree so much with, because in recently I did a week-long workshop for the local craft school here, and there was about 20-30 children there. I want to say young adults, not children, that's studying, crafts and designing and all kinds of things, to hopefully one day become their own sort of use those skills in a way that will benefit them. And one of the things was, I was teaching networking, and I told them, I was like, I want you now to actually network, and they all laughed at me. And I said, what's the problem? It's like, but we already know who each other is. And I said, well, you know each other's names. That's not the same thing as networking. And I said, what's the difference? And so I explained to them that networking is to see how you can actually benefit each other, right? So that's basically what we want to do here. We don't just want to add friends to Facebook, our Facebook friends, right? We actually want, like a friend of mine, Rowan van Dijk, he says, a friend is only a friend if you can use them, right? And that sounds terrible, but it's true. You should be able to rely on your friends. And I told them, it's like, right now, what I want you to do is I want you to network. And I gave them some tips and all kinds of things about how to start a conversation. And then they started knowing that, hey, hang on, this guy does designing, right? So that guy can actually make posters and things. This guy speaks 5 languages, right? This one does this one is in accounting. I was like, and have you thought maybe of joining forces and starting your own little business, right?
Yes.
Because you've got really nothing to lose. You're actually using all the school's resources that you're already paying for, right? There's space here. We can actually go now and we can talk to them and just get you space. Within that short session, they started the business, a collaboration. And it's so wonderful because now this one is doing letter work, this one is doing the promotions, studying PR, this one is doing the design work and the accounting and all kinds of things, and they just joined forces. And they made it so that you don't have to start a business if that's not what you want to do, right? But you can be entrepreneurial in your pursuits by joining forces with someone else.
That's incredible. Wow, that was really a powerful learning moment.
It's one of those things that you just, like you said, it's not about finding your passion, because none of them really knew what they were passionate about. They were studying something because, they need to study something, right?
Yeah.
But you showed them, and that's what mentorship is really all about, isn't it? It's not about, like I said, it's more of a compass than a map. It's not, these are the steps. It's just like minor course corrections, really.
That's definitely true. And I love that collaboration thing. I remember when I was in varsity, when I started being a little bit of an entrepreneur, it wasn't by choice, not a chance. It was. I mean, I was in second year, and my parents were like, "Okay, Sanele, listen, you can't pay for your fees anymore because we're just having some financial issues right now, etc., etc." So you have a couple of options. Number one, drop out of school, work, and then come back to school later. Number two, go to a public school. Because at the time, I chose to go to a private university. Like, go to a public school and then maybe stand a chance to get, NAFSA's government funding. Or get a ridiculous bank loan. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not being tied down for 50 years of my life to pay this. And I forged the fourth option. I said, you know what? Don't worry, guys. I'm going to figure it out. So they looked at me kind of like, you're like
Okay.
19. Okay, we'll see, But I was like, no, figure it out. I'm staying in my school. And one of the first things I did touches on the first thing that we spoke about, which is looking at what you have and then look at the market. I had 50 Rand on me. And I used to go into town quite a lot because I took taxis there to school. And there used to be ladies who sell secondhand clothing that they get from, I think, probably from America or something, as charity donations, and then they sell them, they resell them. But they just put them down on the floor of the street. It's nothing fancy at all. And they sell it for very little money, 10 Rand, And I bought 5 items of clothing. I washed them. I told everyone I've got vintage clothing, right? Branding is important. Perception. Said I have vintage clothing and I'm selling it. And my first sale was one pair of shorts and I just made it $50, although I'd bought it for $10. And my startup capital was $50. And the person paid happily. They told so many other people that everyone was like, oh my God, we need that. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. Now it's 100.
Yeah. It's supply and demand. It's basic economics.
They couldn't find stores. But it's basic economics. But then, anyways, that's just showing that you just to start, really. They knew it's secondhand clothing. They knew I washed it and I'm selling it. I just call it vintage. But to go back to the part where you use each other as friends or rather network within your space, is after doing that for quite a bit, I made enough money, sort of, to be able to be bolder as an entrepreneur. And I was like, hey, I'm studying brand management. That was my course. And I was like, you know what? I'll do brand strategy for small businesses and medium businesses. I'm just going to approach them and tell them I can do this. And I did. And as I got jobs, I realized, oh, heck, I can't do graphic design. I'm not a copywriter. I definitely can't do anything involving videography. But in my university, there are people who can. And that's what I did. I was like, ooh, that's cheaper than outsourcing.
It is cheaper because they want the experience.
Students, and had a conversation with different students. Exactly. You're all just looking for experience. You all want a good portfolio. So why not? And I spoke to students and then that became my business. And it did really, really well. And students were creating the photos, creating everything, the adverts, and young minds are much fresher than the people who've been on the line for quite some time. So you get even more innovative ideas, like really out of the box stuff. And that was the beginning of like my sort of branding or consulting on to now, by the way. But at the time it was just students. So it is really important to look around us and see who's around us and how can they help, and tap into that network and realize networking and our power lies in the people that we are around and the people that we tap into the resources of.
Yeah, human resources, right? I mean, that doesn't mean that you devalue them as only resources. They are your friends and so forth, but they are there with experience, with knowledge. Use it, benefit from it, and you'll be amazed that when they need help, you'll be there as well. Because that's how this thing works. It's not like in professional speaking. There's a saying: it's not about cutting up the pie into smaller pieces. It's about making the pie bigger, right? Bigger. So we have to focus on creating more awareness and making the pie bigger. But if you're going to wait for your passion, for the la-di-da aha moment, right, before you actually even start anything, it's never going to happen. You would never have been able to turn that $50 into that 50 Rand into any sort of worth, right?
Nope.
It's like, because what most people do is like, I've got 50 Rand on me. And, it's like, it's a depressing state. I don't have money. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to buy alcohol or chocolates or something, But what you did was you thought yourself out of the box. You thought in the box, and you thought, how can I actually add more boxes?
Yes. Yes.
And I
Yes.
love that. Not that vintage clothes selling is your passion, right? It's not like
Absolutely
that's
not.
your passion, right? But coming back to what we were talking about off camera was, well, off recording, it's always the camera, was that what I learned in school was that you take the price of the raw materials, then you include labor cost, and then you add 25% as a profit margin. And that is what you sell something as, right? That's what I
Mm.
was taught in school. What I was taught in life was that people will buy something on the perceived value of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not what the
Yes.
actual value is, but what they perceive the value to be. So that
Yes.
clothing might have cost you $10, but to them it was worth $100, 100 rand. I have to get
Absolutely.
my
Yes.
currencies right now, right?
It's
And
okay. All the same. All the same.
yeah, same, whatever, man. It's and for someone else in a upper class neighborhood or whatever, that might have been worth 1,000 rand or whatever, right?
Yes.
Because it's all about the story behind it and the connection and the value that people perceive it as.
Mm.
People buy pens that's made out of solid gold and all kinds of things, but it still writes the same as a normal pen, right? It's no real different. It, people buy things on what they think it's worth, not what it's actually worth. And I
Know what
love
it's
that.
actually worth.
Yeah. And I love that because that just plays that just such a clear example of that, about starting before you're really ready. Because no
Mm-hmm.
one says like, okay, take your time, Sanele. You've got like a year or two, figure something out, find your purpose, find your passion, go and meditate and you know, maybe keep a dream journal. And then over 3 years' time, when you sort of feel like you're ready, maybe start something. It's like, no, 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 no. I've got 50 Rand in my pocket, right? I don't like the options that I have, so I'm going to create a new option.
A new option.
And
Yes.
that's what I so love about this, because it's all about thinking more creatively, asking yourself better questions, not just
Yes.
thinking differently, but thinking more. You have three
More.
options, right? You could have thought differently, right? Which is like, okay, or you could have thought, let's add one more option to this,
More. Mm.
And I love that. It's so brilliant. Now, how did the coming from entrepreneurship, how did this non-profit thing happen with the school bags for
Happen.
primary school children?
I think my passion I found later is that after a little bit of a struggle myself, I realized that I've got a strong passion for helping other people, especially on things that I've already gone past. I'm like, oh my god, I wish that I could tell that person they can do it too. Like I'm like, oh, that was me a couple of years ago, and that's how the NPO also started. I thought, okay, I'm in a space now where I feel like I have maybe a little bit of room to add something else to everything that I do. And the NPO was on the idea that I look at school kids, like primary school kids specifically in my neighborhood, and I started noticing that people who are in grade 4, grade 5, 6 are dropping out of school.
Mm.
Like they're just stopping school. They haven't even made it to high school and they've decided that's the end of their school career. And that boggled my mind. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to go talk to principals about this and hear what's going on. So I spoke to different principals and student governing bodies, and they said what they noticed is that it's usually the kids that have um, financial struggles. So because other kids tease them because they don't have the right shoes, or they carry these textbooks in a plastic or whatever, it really gets to them. And then they start being really like not confident, start being quiet in class, and then their grades drop, and then they just kind of drop out of the whole school system. And the fact that they're coming from a home that probably is not financially strong, it also means that maybe there's a lot of family members going around and no one is really noticing that this kid is not going to school anymore. There's also that element. It's not like people are like, oh, you're not going to school, great, lovely. People just everyone's just trying to survive, that you almost forget that what's going on with that kid. They walk out and come back at 3 p.m. That's enough. And and I was like, oh God, what can we do about that? I found that a lot of NPOs are really giving uniforms and school shoes. It's like always neglected when it actually carries the most important thing about school, which is your books.
Mm.
And if it's raining outside and you're walking 10 kilometers to go to school, those books are ruined. So you need something to protect them. And it also happens to be the most expensive item to buy when it comes to buying school related things. So that's why I thought, okay, cool, let's do the school bag campaign. I'd love to do more in other ways, but the school bag campaign is the starting off point to say, okay, let's provide kids with school bags, because they don't have the choice that I did when I was 19 to say, I'm going to take this 50 Rand and go sell in the streets. Kids can't go sell in the
You
streets.
can't do that now. Hey, it's
Kids are
totally
poor.
different world.
Yeah, it's a totally different world. You can't be 9 years old and not going to school and just selling on the streets in order to survive when there's a whole community that can help you through that. So I decided to start Iksasa NPO on that base. Say, okay, let me be that community, let me be that mentor for those kids to help them through this until they can do something else for themselves independently.
That's brilliant. And it's so important to have people like yourself that wants to add more value to their community. And that's really what success does. That's what we want. We want people to be successful because they add more value to the community, right? They go
Yes.
back and they put in money, time, effort, and not it's not all about money, but a lot of time and
Yeah.
effort, which is the two big things, right? And they
Yeah.
add that to the community. So by having more successful people, we add more value to the communities. But if we have this, oh, I did it by myself, no one's helping me, don't even touch me, don't bother me sort of attitude, you're not adding
Mm,
any value to anybody or anything, you know? So
that is so true.
we want to have more entrepreneurs. We want to have more entrepreneurs. We want to be a culture of success breeding people. I don't. That sounds wrong,
Yeah,
but
we want to breed leaders, really.
yes,
We want to breed
right.
leaders.
We want
Mm,
people to. I was talking to Andrew Tsuru about this as well, about servant leadership. We want
yes.
servant leaders. We want
Mm,
people who's not in it for the game of politics, not in it for the game of money or for
yes.
what or status. We want them to do the job because they want to do the job because it's in them to serve.
Yes.
And I think
Um,
entrepreneurs are the biggest servers, the biggest people who give always. Because when you see someone has donated, it wasn't the government who donated.
no, it
It's
wasn't.
always first of all the entrepreneurs, especially the
Yes.
SME, the small to medium businesses. Those are the ones
Mm,
that always donate first
yeah,
because
that's very true.
they, the CEOs or the whoever, they also had to struggle to get there, and they
Mm,
know and still remember that struggle, and so they want to help. They can't help as much as say one of these large corporates or whatever, but they are
yeah,
willing to do their part.
that's that's spot on. That is really spot on. I find that yeah, businesses that have people who understand what it's like to be that child, not necessarily exactly that child, but
Mm.
to be that person who's just trying to get your feet, um, tend to be more willing to give. They tend to be more willing to give, absolutely.
And so that's why it's so important, especially in, we call it now developing countries, right? But on a practical sense, it is still a third world. And
Mm,
and I think doesn't matter how we change the lingo around it, doesn't matter what we call it, the reality is the same. We have to have people to it's not enough to have Americans come and help and donate and put up all kinds of fancy structures, or Australians or New
yes.
Zealanders or Europeans or whatever it may be. It has to start inside the country first. We have to
Mm,
have more people who recognize that we have a problem, and it's that we
mm,
are not talking to each other, we're not benefiting from our own resources,
mm,
and
mm.
humans
And
especially. Sorry, you were saying?
absolutely. Yeah, no, I was actually just agreeing, and I wanted to add further onto that it's cool and dandy to have anyone outside of the continent or your country to help. But the truth is, the heart of your problems and the people who know how to solve them best are the people that are living through the problems every day.
Right.
So you can have someone come build a structure for you, and that structure is great, but it's not practical to you as a society's daily needs. There's many times where you come to places that are like urban, rural areas, and people come and build like a computer center, let's say, and they leave, and then that place never gets used again after they go, and then it becomes development. But the truth is, their problem maybe isn't necessarily having access to computers. They have smartphones that are exactly like computers. They know how to use them. Maybe their problem is a little bit different. They're asking, "Ooh, how can I use this to make money?" So maybe you could have made a difference by coming and teaching them that, and leaving that knowledge there, and leaving facilitators teach that, then giving them 10 computers. So it is really important for us to build that as Africa and within our continent, to say, okay, let's have our own leaders, let's have our own entrepreneurs who come back to the community, and then let's build more of people who think that way, so we can solve our own problems, because only we truly know what our problems are and how to best solve them.
Exactly. When I go to companies as a facilitator or trainer, I tell them, like, look, first of all, I don't have all the answers, and I am not here to fix your business, right? I don't understand your business the way you understand your business. So let's get that out of the way first. My goal here is not to fix things. My goal here is to train you to be able to fix your own problems.
Absolutely. Mm.
And there was this cartoon that I saw a few years ago, and uh, it was a plane that was flying over. I'll put it up when I can find it. It was a plane flying over, and the caption said "smart bombs," and it was dropping these packages that says books, knowledge, skills. Instead of bombs.
Mm.
It's like it's smart
Yeah.
bombs. This is how we should bomb people, with smartness.
Yes. With smartness.
Smartness. Yeah, that's the smartest thing I said. And but that's how I think entrepreneurs work. They are our smart bombs.
Yes, yes, they definitely are. They definitely are. They're the backbone of of our economy. Honestly, if we're really thinking about, especially lower income homes, how people in lower income homes survive is mostly through entrepreneurship.
Mm.
It's mostly your mamas selling at the taxi rank. It's mostly the guys that go door to door and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna cut your grass," but they go door to door and they every day. It's mostly those people, and they create this whole hub and market and movement, that is our economy, and money's exchange hands much more than I think corporate as a structure does. uh, it's the people that are here at the bottom that really make it happen, and those are entrepreneurs. We just don't call them that for some reason,
Yeah,
but they're entrepreneurs.
because the money these large corporates get, they don't spend that money in the country, so they're
Hardly.
not really. And even taxes, they find all kinds of technical ways
Ways
to
to
not pay as much tax, or the same amount of tax that they should be paying.
that
So
they should be
really the
paying.
problem is that, I mean, it's not just them, it's also the government that's not spending the money that they actually do get in the right places,
Mm,
right?
mm.
um, it's like building a new parliament building for several billion rand, but the road to the parliament building is broken, right? So no one can get there
Yeah.
anyway. So it's just one of those weird things about actually spending the money where it should go. But I think that's why we need to make more entrepreneurs, because these people are really clever. And I'm
Mm,
not just meaning like academically clever, but they really understand the country and the people, and a lot
mm.
more than most other people. And I want
Yeah.
to see more of that in the youth. And I think that's exactly what
Mm,
we're talking about, is to give the
yeah.
youth the opportunity to become that
Mm.
sort of person, to become the smart bomb the of this new age that we're living in.
Yes, yes. Need to really have and I found, at least with us here in South Africa, there's a big focus on how to write the business plan, how to register a business, how to be good with your with your tax, and all of that kind of stuff. And then they pack up and go, and they're like, okay, we've had our entrepreneurship seminar. People are clued up on what needs to be done. And you know, the youth still walk out of there like, wait a minute, so what right?
I've
And
told yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the entrepreneurship seminar. Thank you very much. You've done paperwork. There was a young man that came to me and he said, it's like he wants to become an entrepreneur. He wants to start a business, but he's like, he doesn't have a business license or it's not registered. It's like, and it's like it doesn't have a tax number. And I said, how big a company are you planning to start? No, it's just him. I was like, then stop working on the paperwork and start working on what you actually need to do. Start being the entrepreneur. Nobody gives a damn if your business is registered. No one's come to you and said, hey, you can't play music at our place if you don't have a registered business license or whatever. It's like, hang on, wait a minute. Are you paying your taxes? You are a solo entrepreneur that earn less than 100,000 rand a month, a year. Are you paying your taxes? No one cares. If you want to be a business person, then be a business person. Start a business. The paperwork can come later, but you need to start now.
Yeah. So it's almost as if, as much as they well intended, those kind of seminars that are created by the state and whatnot, they actually just put more burden on young people to see that they really cannot become entrepreneurs. They're like, oh my goodness, I must now have 800 rand or whatever to register my business. How am I ever going to get 800 rand in my hands? I've never even held more than 200 bucks in my hand. So how's this going to happen? It's actually creating more obstacles. So
You are
I'm
creating
really
more obstacles.
on a mission.
Yeah.
You are. And that's why I'm really on a mission to try and get young entrepreneurship taught practically. Seminars to be about practical stuff, not just to have seminars that have cool. Actually, I like having cool radio DJs or cool TV personalities because people, come in. But there must be more than that after that. After that, let's have people who are entrepreneurs who say, hey, this is what I've had to go through and this is how I did it. And I'm going to teach you how to do this very important part that is usually a hiccup at the beginning. And, and the next and the next. But to just be like, here's some paperwork. And then on top of that, here's someone who's got an 8 to 9 job who's going to tell you all about entrepreneurship is like, it's not quite right. So I'm on like a journey right now to try and really create a space where we can have practical entrepreneurship seminars that I wish that I had when I started, and that I still wish I had. So I'm going to walk out of here and I'm going to be at least good at this one thing practically. So that's the journey I'm on right now.
That's cool because it's not just you hype him up and send them out of a sugar rush sort of thing. It's actually teaching them skills they can use now. And that's so important because we are doing the youth a disservice by pumping them full of sugar. And I mean sugar by these big lofty ideas without any skills or tools or knowledge to do anything about it.
To do it. That's why I love telling that 50 ride story, because everyone's always like, really? I'm like, yep, 50 bucks.
But you have to start somewhere, right? And why not start with the resources that you already have? And a lot of these children, they already have a lot of resources at hand.
Smartphone is one of them.
Smartphone is one of them. Just this technological terror. What I would have given to have one of those as a child, right?
Oh, goodness. There's so much money to be made in social, and just have social media. I was talking to someone about this briefly the other day, about in our communities in townships, if someone just started saying, you know what, I'll be your social media accounts manager for tuck shops or for guys that sell clothing but don't know how to reach their audience because they're not really tech savvy. Every kid born after year 2000 is tech savvy. And that's something that you do basically for free. You're doing it for fun. You actually do like being on Facebook. And you can advertise their business and people come through. Like, it's something that you don't even need anything outside of yourself. You're already buying data. You're already using a smartphone. Now you're approaching people and making money from that. So there's so many things that we can do with what we have. We just don't have the mindset to think strategically about our resources. We don't have the mind that makes us see our resources, both the physical ones and human resources that we have at our hands.
I think that's a good place to end off this discussion. And anybody who's watching this on YouTube or listening to this on SoundCloud or Podbean or wherever, drop me a comment and say what's your entrepreneurial spirit like? What is your thoughts on this? Have you a business startup? What did you do when you were younger? Did you have access to social media and all the things that we have now? And I'm going to put some comments, some links in the description to connect with Sanele, so you can see if you can maybe help her with her backpack problem. That sounded weird. Her back problem. Her back. But with helping maybe with her causes as well. And I'm absolutely certain she'd be happy to start a conversation with you as well. And with that, I want to say thank you, Sanele, for this wonderful discussion. And it's just so wonderful to meet new people and to have these sort of talks. And let's help people move up in life and not just on with it. Seeing you next time.